All right, so let's talk about analyzing the company. That is the internal analysis aspect of a situation analysis. Now, many organizations don't like to do an internal analysis, and if you're an outside consultant coming into an organization, it is important that you go through and discuss the internal analysis with as many key players in the organization as possible so that you get a really good feeling for what the internal analysis looks like. One of my favorite quotes for an internal analysis is, "A man's got to know his limitations." This is a quote, of course, from the famous Dirty Harry movie series where Clint Eastwood was Dirty Harry. And this is an important notion. That is, everybody has to know their limitations. I play a lot of golf in my old age, and there are certain parts of my game that are better than others, and it's important to know what your strengths are and what your limitations are, because you would like to make sure that your golf game plays into your strengths and you avoid those things that you're not as good at. It's the same thing happens, I used to coach college football, and we coach college football. It's important that the team coaches understand what the team is good at and what the team is not good at. And so that you can sort of hide those weaknesses and focus on gaining due to your strengths. Another quote along the same line is, "Know thyself," which of course is sort of the same thing, right? Know yourself. Quote from me, "Introspection is probably the most difficult planning activity and perhaps the most valuable. Individuals and organizations do not like to do the introspection, that is the self-analysis, that is understanding what their strengths and weaknesses are." Turns out that you're the same way. If you don't believe me, ask your best friend or significant other or whoever it might be, and ask them, what do you think my biggest weaknesses are? That is likely to end up in a less than pleasant discussion when it's all said and done. We love to hear people tell us how great we are. We are not good at having people tell us what we are not good at. And so introspection is very, very problematic. An example of introspection that I always point out to my to anyone who's interested in doing planning is that if I ask an organization, if I ask the leadership in an organization, what's your biggest strength? They will always say, our people. That's almost always the first thing they say. Our biggest strength is our people. Our people are great. Well, you and I both know that not every organization has great people, but that is the cliche answer to the question of what is your biggest strength? It's our people. If you ask them what their biggest weakness is, well, they don't really have an answer for that. This goes back to, for instance, when you do a job interview. When you do a job interview, many times the interviewer will ask you what you think your best strengths are. And you'll have a number of different things that you'll say about your strengths. And about halfway through you going through that long list of strengths you have, they may turn to you and say, well, what do you think your biggest weakness is? And just for a moment, you're tempted to be honest and say, well, my biggest strength is I'm inherently lazy. I miss deadlines all the time. It could be it could be a number of different things. But of course, you've been trained at our academic success center in the College of Business in the Career Prep Center. And your response to that, of course, will be some weakness that you can turn into a strength. When I was going to school, the one that I used to use all the time was, well, I'm a little bit impatient. And so sometimes when somebody else drops the ball on a project, I just pick it up and run with it myself and finish it. There I've taken what could be considered a weakness, and I've done what with it? I've turned it right back into a strength. The purpose of the internal analysis is to identify the organization's strengths and weaknesses. That is, things that they're good at, things that they're not good at. That, of course, is identifying the SW in the SWOT analysis. Remember, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And the strengths and weaknesses part of this are internal. That is, they're the strengths and weaknesses of the organization. So what information do we need to analyze adequately and perform an internal situation analysis? And of course, the answer to that is it changes for every single marketing plan and market opportunity analysis. But you do want to sit down and ask yourself what internal information is critical for our internal analysis report. Typical information for an internal analysis, you might start off with some relevant business unit history, goals, and culture, questions about mission statement, current goals, how important the business is to the parent company, and a number of things like that. And of course, the purpose behind finding this information is to get a feeling for what business this organization is in, and what sort of a organizational culture do they have to be successful in that particular business. Of course, we might start off with historical and current sales and profits per product line and share of market. This, of course, would be the sort of the basic nuts and bolts that we do for every internal analysis. We want to know about their current sales, and we want to know about profitability, share of market, those sorts of things. We really want to understand their business. Now, the people who run the business probably know this very well and probably have the ability to produce this information rather quickly. Now, the other thing that I always like to get when we do the internal analysis is past successes and past failures. And the reason for that is, if I go around the organization and ask you to describe what your strengths and weaknesses are, you'll have one set of answers. But the benefit of looking at past successes and past failures is that those are objective events that help us to identify what we're good at and what we're not good at. So these are actual evidence of success and evidence of failures. And this then provides us with some information that we should be able to deduce what it is that we're good at and what kinds of things we're not good at. We also would want to know something about resources. And of course, it could be human resources. It could be financial and other constraints and resources. You know, for instance, Apple constantly sits on a mountain of cash. And of course, there's lots of people who argue that Apple should give some of that cash back to its shareholders. But Apple contains that they want to have that money available, those financial resources available, in case they need to do something in a big hurry or to buy someone that they think will really help their product improve. There's the notion of brand equity. And when we get to strategy, we'll talk a little bit more about brand equity. But of course, there are 5 elements to brand equity, and let's see if I can name them right off the top of my head. It's awareness, it's brand loyalty, it's perceived quality, it's assets, and it's other associations. Distinct competencies, that is, what can our business unit do better than anyone else? What is it that we're really good at? And then, of course, there's this notion of physical facilities. Those are additional resources that we might want to talk about. What do our physical facilities look like? In the project that we're embarking on, we want to understand the physical facilities associated with our company. And then, of course, other kinds of resources that an organization might have. And those could be anything from, you know, patents to having moved down the experience curve to some sort of economies of scale to a number of other things. We then want to talk about offerings, and we're going to spend a little bit of time in more detail talking about offerings, but these are, what is our current strategy and what kinds of products do we have and services do we have to to offer to the market. And then, and then other things like what's our promotional strategy going to look like and what's our distribution look like. So now let's go into each of these areas in a little bit more detail. So it's on to the next lecture.